The day my father died, I looked into my grandmother's eyes and knew that my life would never be mine again. My name is Emily Parker, I'm 20 years old, and up until that day I thought the worst thing that could happen to me was failing my chemistry midterm or getting dumped by my boyfriend. But after my father's car skidded off the icy highway outside Rockland, it became clear that everything that used to define me, my future, my dreams, even my happiness, had slipped right through my fingers and into her grasp. Grandmother Evelyn swept into our home 2 hours after we got the call from the hospital, trailing a scent of expensive perfume that never quite covered the smell of cigarettes. She embraced my mother with a cold efficiency, patted my little brother's head, and then set her eyes on me. "I will handle everything now," she declared in that voice that brooked no argument. "But it is important to understand, Emily, that you must do your part. Your father would expect nothing less." My mother was too deep in shock to protest. Bills stacked up overnight, and the letters from the bank arrived so fast it was dizzying. We lost our house on Maple Street 3 weeks after the funeral. As we drove to Evelyn's mansion north of Boston, my brother crying quietly in the back seat, I tried to comfort my mother. She just stared ahead, numb. When the iron gates shut behind us, it was like the world spat us out and left us alone with someone who smiled only with her teeth. The mansion became my prison. Evelyn claimed she wanted the best for me, her only granddaughter. She insisted I keep my place at Harvard, said the Parkers must never seem like failures. But the cost was suffocating. I used to have friends. I used to run track and laugh just because it felt good. But in Evelyn's sphere, I was only ever judged by how well I represented her perfect vision of family success and discipline. My days became a calendar of obedience. Classes, chores, appearances, all watched, weighed, and critiqued. She turned every little thing into a test. I woke up to find my closet rearranged in the colors and styles she decided suited our name. Every evening she questioned me about grades, acquaintances, even my smile. "We don't show weakness, Emily," she'd say as she twisted tight curls around her fingers, her rings clinking together. If I failed even slightly, if I brought home anything less than an A, if I was late, if I wanted to visit a friend, she'd mete out consequences with the smooth calm of a person who never questions her right to rule. And always, there was this edge beneath her control, a threat unspoken. Without her, we'd be nothing. We'd be on the streets. Worst of all, she knew how to hurt me. The day I asked to visit Dad's grave, she said flatly, "Grief is weakness. Parkers move on." My mother looked away, grief twisting her face, and my brother stared at the carpet. After that, I learned to keep quiet about my pain. The only place I could breathe was the university library, where I hid among ancient books. But even there, Evelyn's reach stretched long. She donated to the school, called my professors, even messaged my friends' parents. At first, they found it quirky. Soon they avoided me altogether. My phone filled with messages from Evelyn instead, reminders of my responsibilities. I wanted to believe college could give me an escape, but she made sure every opportunity, every scholarship, every part-time job was meticulously curated to benefit her image, never my growth. When I considered a semester abroad, she threatened to cut off my tuition and my mother's medical insurance. When I tried to confide in a friend, she read our texts and called their parents. She controlled the family tech accounts, passwords, and finances. If I needed something, I had to ask and endure her gaze before getting a reply. Some nights, I cried quietly in my bed, visions of Dad's warm smile and carefree laugh playing in my head. Other nights, anger seethed under my ribs, making my hands tremble. Why did no one see what Evelyn was doing to us? Why did no one step in? My mother retreated further each day, lost in silent misery. She tried, at first, to shield me from Evelyn's sharp tongue, but Evelyn always won. I began to understand that there was a price for everything she provided, and it was always higher than I expected. The real shift came when my best friend Jade disappeared from my life. She'd been the only one who still visited, refusing to be scared off by Evelyn's cold hospitality or cutting words. Then one day, I found a letter in my desk drawer. In Jade's handwriting, it read, "I'm sorry, Em. Your grandmother came to my house. My parents say it's for the best if I keep my distance. I can't put them through this. Please forgive me. That's when I stopped crying. The pain froze, and hatred took its place. A hot, focused hatred for the woman who ruined my friendships, controlled my future, and hollowed out our family. If Evelyn ruled the mansion, I would build my fortress inside myself. Suddenly, surviving wasn't enough. I had to find a way to fight back, to free myself from her shadow, even if it cost me everything else. Because with every cruel choice she made in Dad's name, I grew more certain. The only way out was through her. And I wasn't the only one suffering. As winter closed its fists around Rockland, secrets started to unravel in our perfect household. Some of those secrets would change everything I thought I knew about my family. And about myself. There's something about living with the devil that teaches you to see through all kinds of masks. One snowy night, as I stood at the top of the staircase listening to Evelyn's low voice on the phone, plotting and manipulating yet again, I realized she wasn't just trying to raise me right. She was hiding something. Something big enough to destroy us all. What I learned next made even my darkest suspicions seem tame. But that night, hearing her whisper threats to a stranger on the other end of the line, I swore that for once, I'd be the one turning the tables. I couldn't let my grandmother win. Not this time. Not ever. And as I braced myself for the winter to come, I felt the first surge of hope in months. Because for the first time, I had a plan. What happened next would change everything. Evelyn's reign over our lives didn't falter. Not even after I started keeping secrets of my own. By March, I had grown skilled at moving through the mansion unnoticed, silent as the snow in the backyard. If she demanded perfection in the open, I answered with rebellion hidden beneath the surface. I worked twice as hard at school, studying late at night while Evelyn believed I was sleeping. I snuck calls to my mother's estranged sister in New Jersey, a woman Evelyn hated with a venom that felt personal, though she never explained why. Each time my aunt's soft, worried voice came through the receiver, I felt like I might still belong to someone, somewhere. But living under Evelyn's thumb was to live in constant dread of her unpredictable punishments. She believed pain built character and often reminded us, "You're a Parker. We survive anything." I took to writing in a journal I hid in the attic, my only confidant. Ink became my weapon, a way to cling to my sense of self, to sort the tangled grief from the rising tide of resentment. One night, while searching the attic for an old yearbook I needed for a project, I stumbled across a battered green trunk. I recognized it from my childhood, Dad's keepsake box. Driven by a mix of longing and defiance, I broke the lock. Inside, I found photographs of my father as a boy, a bundle of letters, and a silver bracelet engraved with "To S, Love Always, E." I traced the letters, frowning. Who was S? And why did Evelyn send love to someone who wasn't her child? When I quietly brought it up at dinner, Evelyn's eyes flashed. "Some stories are best left to history," she snapped, and the room fell silent. From then on, I watched her more closely. In public, she played the doting grandmother. Her smile stretched wide for neighbors, her voice syrupy sweet to old friends from the country club. But when we were alone, the mask dropped. She criticized every aspect of my appearance and berated my mother for imagined slights. She belittled our sadness, turning every emotion into a contest she always won. Still, I collected scraps of her secrets. Mystery callers, hidden jewelry, the occasional cryptic receipt that slipped from her purse. My plan was to gather enough proof of her cruelty and manipulation that no one, even her powerful friends, could deny who she truly was. Yet it wasn't just Evelyn I had to worry about. My mother, already fragile, slid deeper into depression. My brother, Mason, once the loudest voice at our family table, hardly spoke anymore. The house felt like a mausoleum. Sometimes, in the early mornings, I'd hear Evelyn's footsteps echoing down the marble halls, her silhouette passing by my door like a shadow that never left. At school, I let people believe I was thriving. I kept my head down, avoided questions, smiled for photos. Inside, I started to harden, to become someone I didn't quite recognize. Someone who could lie without a second thought, who could smile at her enemy and keep it together until she was alone. But everything changed the night of my grandmother's charity gala. Evelyn's parties drew half of Boston's elite, all eager to be seen in the great chandelier-lit ballroom of the mansion. She made a grand show of introducing me as her pride and joy, parading me in a dress I hated for people I barely knew. Toward midnight, unable to stomach one more forced compliment, I slipped out into the garden, leaning against an old sycamore tree and breathing in the frigid air. That's when I heard the voices, soft, urgent, unmistakable. I crept closer to the lit window and saw Evelyn in a heated conversation with a man I'd never met, her tone sharp and commanding. "You can't back out now," she hissed. "If you betray me, I'll ruin you. Remember New Orleans?" I pressed my hand to my mouth. I didn't know what it meant, but I instantly understood. Whatever she was hiding, it went far beyond domestic cruelty or family drama. That night, heart racing, I wrote down everything I saw and heard. In the days that followed, my plans sharpened. I needed proof, not just of Evelyn's cruelty, but of the crimes she tried so hard to hide. The risk was enormous, but for the first time I wasn't afraid. I had to stand up, if not for myself, for my brother, and for my mother. I was tired of the silence. If you've made it this far, if you're listening to a story about a girl subsumed by her grandmother's darkness, can you tell me where you're listening from? It brings me comfort, honestly, to know I'm not alone with these memories. Press reply and share your city or your story, even if just to let me feel a little less invisible right now. If you're ready, let me take you deeper, because the night I finally faced my grandmother was a night I will never forget. The confrontation began, not with fireworks, but with a single, simple line. I came home late from the library, breath fogging in the cold. Evelyn stood waiting by the kitchen table, bathed in golden lamplight, arms folded, lips pressed thin. She'd found the letter from Jade. "I warned you, Emily." Her voice was icy. "Weakness has no place in this family. Cut ties with her, and with your past, now." I crossed the threshold, my heart racing but my chin up. "If you're so strong, why are you so afraid of the truth?" I asked, surprising even myself. Evelyn didn't flinch, but I saw her hand tremble. She told me that every gift came with a price. "If I set you free, what would become of you? Of your mother? You think people care? When your father died, the world kept turning. I kept your family safe. You should be grateful." Gratitude. Such a simple thing, so poisonous in her mouth. I stared at the gleaming floor and let her words pass over me. All her power, all her money, all her control. It had never made her loved. It had only ever filled her with fear that one day the mask would slip and people would see the darkness underneath. "You always said you did this for me, but what about what I want?" I said, desperate for her to see the damage. She shook her head. "What you want isn't real. Only security is real." She left me standing in the kitchen, listening to the echo of her footsteps on marble. The next day, I dug deeper into her secrets. I searched her study when she was out, rifling through desk drawers for clues. Beneath a false bottom, I found dossiers on men and women from across the city, photos, addresses, notes in Evelyn's looping script. Blackmail. I snapped photos on my phone, feeling something inside me harden. This was leverage. Maybe my ticket out. But I needed more. Meanwhile, at school, the strain began to show. Classmates grew distant, rumors spread. A professor asked if I needed help. But how do you tell someone you're being slowly erased by a loving relative? Even my few remaining friends began to keep their distance. I became desperate, angry, reckless. One night, I returned home to find my mother quietly crying in her room. When I tried to comfort her, she turned away, ashamed. "She says we have to earn our place here," she whispered. "That without her, we'd have lost everything. Is she right, Emily?" I wanted to promise things would get better, that I'd protect them, but I wasn't sure I could. Evelyn still controlled every aspect of our days, every dollar, every decision. Even as I plotted, I wondered, was this who I was becoming? A person who could manipulate and deceive just like her? But the answer was simple. I wasn't doing this for power. I was doing it for freedom, for my family, for myself. If I let her keep winning, there'd soon be nothing left of the real Emily Parker. The next clue came almost accidentally. While helping Mason with his homework, he mentioned Evelyn's hidden basement room, the room no one could enter. Late one night, I went searching. I found the locked door and, with a bobby pin and nerves of steel, managed to pick the lock. What I discovered changed everything. The truth was more sinister and closer to home than I ever could have feared. And as the dawn broke over Rockland, I knew my life would never be the same. Let me tell you what I found. Inside that forbidden basement room, the air was cold and stagnant, thick with the heavy scent of forgotten memories and old secrets. For a moment, the darkness pressed in so tightly I thought about turning back. But something inside me, a stubborn spark, maybe even a bit of that Parker fire Evelyn always boasted about, kept me moving forward. My trembling hands fumbled for the light switch. The bulb flickered to life overhead, casting jagged shadows across the room. The first thing I saw was a wall covered in photographs, some yellowed with time, others recent and sharp. There were images of my father, of my mother, of me. It was an impossible collage, moments from our lives I didn't even remember someone seeing, let alone capturing. In the center was a portrait of Evelyn herself, stern and regal, eyes dark as empty wells. Next to the wall hung a small corkboard pinned with notes, receipts, and clipped newspaper headlines. Some stories were about business collapses, families ruined, and mysterious disappearances across Massachusetts and beyond, all traced in red ink to names in Evelyn's looping handwriting. Along one shelf, row after row of journals, her meticulous, cruel record-keeping detailed everything from financial transactions to threats, betrayals, and bribes. Here, Evelyn had not only kept a ledger of her vengeance on those who'd wronged her, but also a chilling list of allies and enemies. At the bottom of the shelves, I found a battered file labeled "The Final Account." Inside, forged contracts, bank statements, and letters from unsuspecting victims whose lives Evelyn had dismantled, sometimes for profit, but often out of pure spite. It hit me like a punch. My grandmother hadn't just been cruel to us. She'd manipulated, blackmailed, and destroyed dozens of families. She was the architect of every misfortune I'd blamed on bad luck. I suddenly heard footsteps above. Panic slammed into me, but I forced myself calm. I shoved papers, phones, journals, anything I could use, into my backpack. I had to get out before she realized what I'd found. By the time I returned to my room, heart pounding, I was shaking. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I filled page after page in my journal with everything I had learned and everything I planned to do. For years, Evelyn had crafted the image of the perfect matriarch. She hosted charity balls, mentored young women, and posed for endless photographs with smiling grandchildren. Now I saw her for what she really was, a master manipulator, a woman who saw weakness as an invitation to destroy. But I also realized that exposing her wouldn't be enough. The city's elite owed her favors, and her power reached further than I'd ever understood. Just showing the world her crimes might not protect my family. Instead, it could put us in greater danger. I would need to be clever, patient, and above all, brave. The next week was a blur of plotting and paranoia. I developed a careful plan to share copies of Evelyn's secrets with people who had the most to lose if the truth came out, namely, her closest confidants and partners in crime. But I had to make them believe the documents were everywhere, impossible to destroy. For the first time, I understood the delicate balance Evelyn lived within, always on a knife edge between absolute power and total exposure. At home, I became almost invisible, a shadow passing through rooms I no longer felt were mine. Evelyn seemed to sense change in the air. She questioned me more sharply, watched me more closely, and berated my mother and Mason at every opportunity. Even so, she had no idea how much I knew. What kept me sane through those days was Mason. I tried to shield him from Evelyn's venom and encouraged him to hold on to whatever scraps of childhood he still had left. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch together as dusk fell, and I'd tell him stories, making up happy endings for all the kids whose lives had been torn apart by people like Evelyn. One night, he squeezed my hand, eyes wide and trusting. "Are you scared, Em?" he asked. For the first time in months, I told him the truth. "A little," I said. "But I'm more scared of what will happen if we never stand up for ourselves." He nodded, more serious than any 12-year-old should have to be. I hugged him tightly, vowing not to let him become another casualty of Evelyn's bitterness. Still, there were moments when doubt gnawed at me. What if my evidence wasn't enough? What if no one believed me? What if taking her down meant ruining what fragile family I still had? But whenever panic threatened to paralyze me, I remembered Dad's voice saying, "Do the right thing, even when it's hard." That voice became my anchor. As I prepared to set my plan in motion, Evelyn threw a wrench into everything. A week before my 19th birthday, she announced a family vacation to Martha's Vineyard, a tradition meant to showcase Parker unity to her elite friends. I knew she intended to parade us in front of her powerful allies, cementing her reputation one more time. But what if I could turn her own stage against her? My mind raced with the possibilities. As the ferry drew closer to the island and Evelyn's plans began to unfold, I realized I might never get a better chance. If I failed, I'd lose everything. But if I succeeded, it would all finally end. The storm I'd waited for was almost here, and my family's future hung in the balance. When we arrived on Martha's Vineyard, the ocean looked cold and endless. The sky a dull pewter pressed hard against the waves. Evelyn was all smiles for the cameras and the arriving guests, her arm looped through mine in a practiced gesture that might have fooled anyone watching. I couldn't remember the last time she'd touched me like a grandmother, not a prop in one of her performances. The house she'd rented, whitewashed, sprawling, lines sharp against the wild grass and salt air, was filled with people she called dear friends. I recognized the names from her secret files: politicians, bankers, lawyers, and socialites, each one more polished and distant than the last. I spent that first night scanning the crowd for weaknesses. I watched Evelyn move from group to group, her laughter too loud, her compliments always cutting deeper than praise should. When she introduced me, it was as our bright future, studying at Harvard, such a role model for the Parkers. I smiled and let her enjoy the spotlight, all the while taking mental notes of every sideways glance and nervous laugh. People did not genuinely like my grandmother, I realized. They feared her, respected her reach and influence, but few seemed to love her for anything real. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I snuck into the little cottage behind the main house, Evelyn's private office for the weekend. I felt a visceral, electrifying fear as I flicked on a lamp and laid my evidence across her antique desk. I sorted through messages, copies of files, photographs, and coded notes, and bundled each set for a certain name at that weekend's party. I made sure the information couldn't be easily traced straight back to me, but could destroy her if anyone chose to use it. My hands shook as I worked. I kept flashing back to those years Evelyn controlled every aspect of my life, every dream and feeling. I remembered her telling me, "The world will never pity a Parker." Now, I was proving that the world could see every hidden wound. I left each package under the doors of several guests late at night, anonymously but unmistakably from within the family, and impossible to ignore. The next morning, a storm broke over the island, wind howling through the eaves and rain lashing against the windows. Whispers spread through the house even before breakfast. I watched unease ripple through the crowd. Mrs. Addison's hands shook as she poured coffee. Judge Sims stared pointedly at Evelyn over the newspaper, and Senator Klein made a phone call so heated I could hear his voice from the next room. Evelyn didn't notice at first. She was busy scolding Mason for not tucking in his shirt and belittling my mother for forgetting to arrange flowers. But soon the cracks were too wide to ignore, even for her. People began to avoid Evelyn, their worshipful attentiveness replaced by strained, clipped conversation. A few guests left suddenly, muttering about an urgent matter in Boston. Evelyn's lips narrowed into a tight line, her charm brittle and failing. That afternoon, as I was walking in the gardens, I found Mrs. Addison sitting on a stone bench, weeping. I sat next to her quietly, She gripped my hand and whispered, "Thank you. I know it was you. But you have to be careful, Emily. Powerful people don't like being exposed." I promised I would protect myself, but fear set my heart racing again. No one truly understood how far Evelyn would go to protect her secrets. As the party drew to a close that night, Evelyn called a last-minute family meeting. The air in the living room was thick with tension. She stood before us, regal and frightening, her gaze passing over each of us like a sentence being handed down. "Someone here has betrayed this family," she announced. "Perhaps more than one." My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to speak, to scream, but I couldn't move. My mother's face was bloodless. Mason looked at the floor, and my own skin felt too tight for my bones. Evelyn's voice sharpened. "It doesn't matter what's been said or done. Loyalty is the only thing that matters in a world like this. If I find out who tried to hurt us, hurt me, I will not forgive or forget. Remember, Emily, you are nothing without your family." But for the first time, her words didn't make me feel small. They sounded hollow, desperate, a threat she could barely hold together. Her era of dominance was ending, and she could sense it. The room was silent, the family she'd spent years training to fear her now watching her fall apart. I could taste victory, but dread lurked nearby. Destroying someone like Evelyn wouldn't come without a price. I needed to watch every move. As the storm raged outside and the family scattered, I ran my fingers over the gold locket around my neck that once belonged to my grandmother. Inside was a photo of my father as a boy, and suddenly it struck me. I wasn't only fighting for the life Evelyn had stolen from me, but for the piece of him she'd twisted, the part of our family that deserved to be whole again. The storm was far from over. That night, I would find out how far Evelyn was willing to go, and how much I might have to lose if I ever wanted to break free for good. That night on the island, sleep eluded me. I stayed awake listening to the wind batter the sides of the house, my mind racing through every possibility, every risk, every hope, every piece of hard-won evidence hidden beneath my mattress. Around 2 a.m, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside our rooms. Slow, deliberate, heavier than anyone else's in the house. I recognized Evelyn's pattern. I shut my eyes and held my breath as she paused in front of my door, her presence a thick, invisible weight in the darkness. For a moment, I thought she would come in, that she would know everything, drag me out and end this game of cat and mouse once and for all. Instead, she moved on. When it was safe, I crept to the window and looked out over the yard, where the trees bowed and writhed in the storm. I wondered what Dad would think of me. If he'd be proud that I was standing up for us, or afraid for where it all might lead. But beneath the fear, something else simmered. Determination edged with something close to vengeance. I wasn't breaking under Evelyn's rule. I was changing, learning how to press through fear like a door that had finally come loose on its rusty hinges. By noon, the island was buzzing with rumors. Some guests confronted Evelyn directly, waving manila envelopes and damning evidence. Others simply left, their eyes flicking across me in quiet recognition. In every corner, I heard my grandmother's legacy unraveling, a dozen webs snapping, lies and betrayals spilling into the brittle New England light. She tried to salvage things, of course. She stormed into the living room, flinging accusations like daggers. "Whoever did this is ungrateful, spineless, no better than the parasites who've always clung to this family." Her voice echoed, but it didn't inspire fear any longer. People kept their eyes low, their bodies tense. When she looked at my mother, her anger turned sharp and personal. "You were always weak," she hissed. "You brought shame to the Parkers, first by marrying beneath us, then with that pathetic grieving." My mother trembled, half rising from the sofa, but I stepped between them. "Enough," I said quietly, and in that hush, something in my voice made Evelyn waver. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "You," she spat, "after everything I gave you, you took more than you ever gave. You destroyed what you claimed to protect." My voice shook, but I didn't back down. "I'm done being afraid of you. I'm done letting you decide who I am. Whatever happens next, you'll never control me again." For a moment, Evelyn seemed lost, her power stripped away in an instant by something she'd never understood. Real love, real loyalty, the kind you can't demand or buy. She shook her head, her face collapsing into something small and unfamiliar. You think you can survive without me? You think anyone will help you? But the desperation in her eyes told me she already knew the answer. It wasn't easy. She fought back, calling in favors, threatening old friends, pulling every possible string. But one by one, her allies slipped out of reach, too fearful of what I'd revealed. For a few days, our family existed in a strange limbo, waiting for the final blow, afraid of what Evelyn might still do with her dwindling power. In those days, I saw real changes in my mother. She started reclaiming little pieces of her old self, singing softly in the kitchen, reaching out to family she hadn't spoken to in years, listening instead of shutting down. Mason talked more, playing in the sand at the beach, his laughter returning in fits and starts. Even I caught glimpses of something like hope, fluttering quietly in the quiet mornings. But just as I began to believe we might finally be free, Evelyn tried one last time to turn everything against us. She invited everyone left to a formal dinner, a ritual of control, her way of reminding us who held the reins. The meal was stiff, every course arriving in silence. In the middle, she rose to her feet and slammed her wine glass down. "I built this family from nothing," she announced, her voice quavering. "You, all of you, owe me. Your lives, your names, your futures. Emily, you think you're free because you aired our dirty laundry? No one outside this house will ever care about girls like you. When the dust settles, you'll come crawling back for my protection." But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. As she spoke, I realized I saw her as she really was. Not a devil, but a frightened, desperate old woman who'd confused power for love, cruelty for strength. Her empire was built on lies, and now the truth was tearing it apart. We left Martha's Vineyard early the next morning, my mother, Mason, and I, crossing the causeway as dawn broke clear and gold over the water. We didn't look back as the house and the woman inside it faded behind us, washed empty by the sea and the storm. Yet as we returned to Boston, I wondered, could our family ever truly heal from everything Evelyn had done? And would the scars of her vengeance ever stop shaping who I was meant to become? There was still one more reckoning to come, and it would change everything for good. Life didn't magically fix itself after we escaped Evelyn's grip, but for the first time in years, it felt like the air was finally clearing. We moved into a tiny apartment in Cambridge, barely big enough for the three of us, but overflowing with a relief so deep it felt like breathing for the first time in ages. My mother found steady work as a librarian, her confidence slowly rekindling beneath the gentle routine of quiet mornings and afternoon story times. Mason started playing soccer again, making friends, bringing home scraped knees and drawings full of wild, hopeful colors. And me? I poured myself into my studies and my work at the university library, finally able to shape my own hours, my own path, even my own fears. But the damage Evelyn had done couldn't be scrubbed away by a change of scenery. Some nights I woke shivering from dreams of her voice still echoing in my head. Sometimes I'd flinch at sharp footsteps in the hallway, half expecting her to appear, arms folded, eyes filled with that cold, pitiless judgment. Healing was its own form of rebellion, I discovered. It was learning to accept kindness again, to trust laughter, to build new bonds and open my heart, without fear they'd be used against me. The aftermath of Evelyn's exposure rippled through Boston's upper crust for months. Investigations opened up, families came forward, her old allies deserted her. I heard whispers at school, saw flashes of her name in the local news, read the shocked comments under online articles. But beneath the headlines, the most important change was invisible. We belonged to ourselves again. No one called us to demand gratitude or obedience. No one made us feel small. One afternoon, deep in exam season, Jade found me in the Harvard cafe. I hadn't seen her since the day she disappeared, since Evelyn had poisoned yet another friendship in her petty quest for control. At first, seeing her again made my heart ache, but Jade just hugged me and said softly, "I heard what happened. I'm sorry I left. For the first time in a long time, I knew she meant it, and that she understood. We sat for hours, slowly patching together the trust my grandmother had tried so hard to destroy. Sometime later, with encouragement from friends and professors, I wrote an essay about what happened to my family, about cycles of manipulation, about reclaiming power from those who use love as a weapon. When my words reached others, students, neighbors, even strangers from different cities, messages poured in. "Your story is my story," someone wrote. "Thank you for telling what I never could." I realized then just how many girls like me walk through the world carrying silent wars inside them, how hard it is to break free, and how powerful it can be to find your voice in the ruins. My mother and I visited my father's grave together that fall. We brought sunflowers, the kind he used to buy for me on birthdays. Kneeling by the polished stone, we talked and cried, and finally forgave ourselves for surviving. I felt the weight of Evelyn's reign starting to lift, replaced by a lighter grief, one that carried space for love and hope too. The final time I saw my grandmother, she was in a rehabilitation center outside the city. She looked smaller, older, her once iron gaze dulled by years of bitterness and loneliness. I stood at the edge of her bed and, for a moment, wished for things that would never be. A real embrace, a whispered apology, a different kind of love. But instead, she turned to the window, silent. No drama, no final threats. In that moment, I realized the victory wasn't just in escaping her house or exposing her lies, but in refusing to become like her. Hard, bitter, in love only with control. As the years passed, I kept healing, learning, loving. Each scar became a chapter, a lesson in resilience and the quiet power of choosing your own path, even when it means walking away from the only family you've ever known. I learned that forgiveness is not a pardon for cruelty, but a gift you claim for your own freedom. Now, as I look back, there are days when the pain still pricks sharp and sudden. But I carry forward not as Evelyn's project, but as my own person. A survivor, a witness, and finally, a builder of true family. Somewhere out there, I hope, other girls like me are reading these words and realizing that the worst someone can do to you does not have to define your life. We get to begin again, stronger for every shadow we've had to outgrow. If you've walked with me this far through my story, thank you. If you felt any part of my struggle in your bones, if you've survived betrayal or rebuilt yourself after loss, or dared to hope for freedom, please subscribe and share your own story in the comments. Your journey matters. Your voice is powerful. And somewhere out there, someone who needs hope is waiting to hear it. Tell me, what stories shaped your courage? What would you like to see next on our journey together? Thank you, from the deepest part of my heart, for being here with me. You helped make this ending possible.